You know, America really was a leader when it came to Internet 1.0. It was the Internet of Knowledge. And the Internet 2.0, again, it was America that led that for the world, not just for our citizens, but for the world. And that was the Internet of Things. And then Internet 3.0 is what we're talking about today, and that's the Internet of Value. And we're approaching it in a principled way. Colleagues here mentioned a couple of those. Number one, do no harm, protect consumers, regulatory structure, that certainty. And secondly is foster innovation, because the opportunities are just really are unimaginable.
Ladies and gentlemen, was a clip from yesterday's crypto conference, or digital asset conference, of course, headed up by the crypto czar, David Sachs. And I think there was a lot of disappointment around that conference because certainly they didn't really mention anything specifically in regards to cryptocurrencies outside of the realms of Bitcoin. But what they did continuously reiterate is this golden era that is now upon us. And I just want to remind people, despite some of the disappointment, just how far this industry has came. The fact that the United States government has agencies that are now giving conferences on digital assets is unbelievable. And I've been in this space for long enough for that to have, at one time, been a pipe dream. And all the things that we've thought are now coming to fruition. And this technology is going to play a vital role in the world that we're moving towards. And we're hopefully on this channel getting you guys into some of those projects. So welcome back, guys, for another jam-packed daily market update. Do apologize for this one being a bit late. We have a hectic day. What I want to do to start things off is just look at some other comments that were made, specifically about the Bitcoin Reserve, also the digital asset plans. And we'll also talk about what David Sachs, play a clip of what David Sachs had to say over on CNBC. He's talking about 6 months we'll have clear regulations, which means this industry will be embraced. We see the SEC doing a U-turn. We've got progress on the ETFs. All of this brilliantly timed, or all of these fundamentally amazing things happening, all occurred or are occurring, or we're going into post a $2.1 billion liquidation of retail. That's what you get for trying to trade leverage. So we've got a lot to get into. Let's look at this next clip of David Sachs actually talking about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, which I think is on the topic of everyone's minds, even people that aren't Bitcoin maxis. And the Bitcoin maxis are furious that there's more innovation to this technology than just Bitcoin, which is a great innovation, but not one that's fit for some of the roles that these distributed ledgers are looking to undertake. I actually think you're going to see more transactions for Bitcoin take place on XRP, which is an entirely other video than Bitcoin itself, but we'll do that video perhaps later on today. Let's look at another clip of David Sachs and what he had to say on the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve.
One of the things that the president instructed us to do was to evaluate the idea for a Bitcoin reserve. And so that is one of the things, that's one of the first things we're going to look at as part of the internal working group in the administration. So as soon as we get all that set up, we're still waiting for some cabinet secretaries who are on the working group to get confirmed. So we're still in the very early stages of this. But that's one of the first things we're gonna look at is the feasibility of a Bitcoin reserve.
So some clarity. I don't think as much as what people wanted. Like I say, really what was reiterated was the broad stroke of this industry and where it's at and where it's heading, and the need to champion it. But there wasn't any specific cryptos mentioned other than perhaps Bitcoin there. But the innovation certainly was, and that didn't give any kind of broad time horizon. David Sachs also sort of spoke on a US digital asset plan as Hester Peirce will lead the task force. Let's go ahead and look at that, and then we'll look at what he had to say on CNBC.
Set up a crypto task force led by Hester Peirce, which is also looking at this issue. And together, our objective is to accomplish the task the president assigned for us in his EO, which is to propose a federal regulatory framework governing the issuance and operation of digital assets, including stablecoins, in the United States. I've talked to many founders over the past few years, and they've told me repeatedly that the number one thing they need from Washington is regulatory clarity. They just want to know what the rules of the road are so they can abide by them. We're coming off, frankly, 4 years of arbitrary prosecution and persecution of crypto companies where the SEC wouldn't tell founders what the rules were, but then they would prosecute them. And many founders have even told me stories of being debanked personally just because they had founded a crypto company.
How ironic, the SEC now has a crypto-specific task force. We've got quite a few clips, guys. Let's dive into what David Sachs had to say on those clear rules of the roads and how long he thinks they're going to take to to essentially come to fruition. He's got a 6-month time period. Remember, fundamentally, there's just such a great story for the cryptocurrency space. And technically, we'll look at it towards the end. We're very much positioned for some explosive upside across the board.
Did talk about the need for this clear regulatory framework. How quickly can you stand this up?
Well, I was on the Hill today meeting with the leaders of our House and Senate committees for banking and for finance, and they are very committed to moving legislation through the House and the Senate this year in order to provide that clear regulatory framework that the digital assets ecosystem needs to sustain innovation in the United States. And so those chairmen, I think, are very committed. President Trump is committed, and I think we can do something here. But as you know, moving legislation through Congress takes time. But I think this is something we could do in the next 6 months.
Well, 6 months isn't a long period of time at all. And, you know, we're already seeing the start of the kind of ETF cascade. We've obviously got the Ethereum Bitcoin combo. Now we're looking for the Litecoin combo. And all of this is happening with the SEC now scaling back its crypto enforcement unit. Some in a special unit of 50 lawyers and staff that had been dedicated to bringing enforcement actions are being reassigned, according to a just published New York Times article. SEC to scale back its crypto enforcement efforts. I know Coinbase doing rather well on the back end. There's some news there. And you can see these people are now being reassigned elsewhere to actually help promote the growth of the cryptocurrency space and eliminate some of the regulatory overreach, which is very interesting. The irony. Also, just yesterday, I thought this was interesting. VanEck Subsidiaries launches a MAGA 10 America crypto index. Obviously, XRP, SOL, Link, AVAX, XLM, SUI, Uni, NEAR, Aptos, and Filecoin are involved in this. And when we looked at what Eric Trump had to say yesterday. So lots of interesting things going on. I think generally people were disappointed with the conference. My opinion is actually it was pretty much what I was expecting. Yes, he didn't mention any specific cryptocurrencies. However, I think that's to come. And I think actually the proof's always going to be in the pudding with these. And we will see things coming out later on down the line. Certainly this year, I'm expecting some insane announcements that I think are going to blow everybody's minds. When it comes to the cryptocurrency space, technically, you guys know what we think for Bitcoin. We ultimately think Bitcoin is going substantially higher. Right now, you're just in a kind of store box, a period of consolidation that ultimately, in my opinion, is going to lead to continuation. This is very much just a range that you're chopping in and around. Obviously, on the back end of the tariffs on Monday, we had a real sort of spill. Then that largely got bought up. We saw some of the largest buy volume after retail was liquidated. It's never such a bad time to enter after a mass liquidation. We saw pretty insane buy volume, some of the most for certain assets, and now it's sort of just in that midpoint of this range. But we do think it's going to push higher. Also, the midpoint of this range was a bull flag target for us. So a key level of significance acting exactly as that. We ultimately think Bitcoin has got this sort of bright future ahead of it. When we look at the total cryptocurrency market cap, really this is just resting on all-time highs. So what you have is a basic resistance, being all-time high resistance into support flip, before we see that continuation. And we've shown you literally, at this point, hundreds of examples of charts going into price discovery in the same manner as what Bitcoin's currently doing. When we look at the totals, these just ran into all-time high resistance, just like we got that sort of pullback for Bitcoin at all-time high resistance. And most charts out there will do this. You'd expect it for this. But this is ultimately going to set up continuation. In my opinion, the broader trend that the total market cap excluding Bitcoin is in is a good one, an intact one, more importantly. Total 2, also a very similar story. All-time high resistance, pullback, ready for continuation, and others. And when you look actually at the altcoins individually, they look beautiful. And a big sort of factor on all this is, of course, what's going to happen with the dollar. And we think that kind of Julian Bittle 2017-esque scenario shall repeat. But yeah, bit of a rush one today, guys. Always so much to cover. I think the main headlines and events that took place yesterday was, of course, the conference. I think a lot of people are saying it was a nothing burger, but I think actually it was a lot more significant just because there weren't certain cryptocurrencies mentioned, and there's always a lot of hype going into these events. Doesn't mean that it was a nothing burger. I think actually far from it. We've came a long way as an industry. We're going to go even further. David Sachs there talking about Bitcoin Reserve, and that this is something that's going to be worked on, an SEC task force for crypto, and actually enabling it, and when they're going to have clear regulations out in this kind of 6-month period. That's ultimately going to enable this industry to thrive. You know, we're looking at this kind of golden era, was what it was called. And certainly as it relates to digital assets, I think we're very much going to see that. So that's it from me, guys. I'm going to love and leave you all on that note. I hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday, wherever you are, whatever it is you're doing. And I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.